What is going on? Welcome back to Shed Built. In this episode, we're building a trailer. Expensive trailer. Alright, before we get into this episode, and seeing as we're working on trailers already, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to work on one of my campers here. Now, I need to install a battery system before we go away for Christmas, but I have a couple of requirements for the system. I want it to, of course, charge my phone, run camp lights, run fridges, all the standard stuff, but I also want it to be able to run AC power so I can charge my laptop, charge the camera batteries, and also use power tools. Now, I also want to be able to charge the system itself through mains power, so run an extension lead, plug it in, run it through the vehicle's power, charge it up through the vehicle, and also through solar. I also want it to be super portable because I do have another camper trailer that I'm working on at the moment. It's not ready yet, but I want to be able to just swap between them or even chuck it into another car if I need to borrow a friend's car because the troopy's taking forever. Let's see what we can come up with. Get in. Now this, ladies and mostly gentlemen, is the BLUETTI 2000 watt portable power station, and it is revolutionary. How good is it that it ticked all of my boxes? Of course, the BLUETTI has AC and DC outputs on the front here under these dustproof covers, and it also has wireless fast charging on the top here. That's pretty cool. It takes vehicle, solar, and mains power inputs down through the side here, and if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen I absolutely torture tested this thing with angle grinders, plasma cutters, and just nothing could kill it. If you follow Sick Puppy 4x4, you would have seen Cody. He's literally running his entire off-grid house for his family off one of these, and that's pretty impressive. If you're looking for a super simple, effective, and affordable power solution for your van, camper, anything outdoors, off-grid related, then there will be links in the description, or you can follow them on Instagram right here. Thanks, BLUETTI. Let's build a trailer! This is my humble little box trailer that I bought for 300 bucks from my neighbor. It is registered and full of rust. We've been using it a lot lately at the workshop because for some reason there's no rubbish collection and it's actually really handy to have around, so we thought we'd give it a bit of love. Once we remove the plywood floor, yes, the plywood floor, because of course there was no steel underneath there, we thought we would just do it properly and send it off for sandblasting. Once we got it back from the blasters, as you can see, there's just nothing left, and ultimately we decided to just completely redo it, start from scratch, and just make a new one basically. For this project, I finally decided to buy a bandsaw, and honestly I don't know how I got by without one before. It is life-changing. But as you can see here, my portable stand no longer fits because the bandsaw stand is tiny. So we had to cut the legs down on the portable stand so we can get a level cut. Now that that's leveled up, we can start bringing in all of our material. And for this project, I'm using 50 by 50 by 3mm SHS. The original plan for the trailer was to just build it as is using a lot of the original parts that were salvageable. So I started by just grabbing some basic dimensions on paper, and then I could then import them into CAD. I'm just using Google SketchUp. It's free, it's easy to use, and it gets the job done. And this is definitely the way to build something like this. You see you've got all your dimensions there laid out, and then I could then print all of these off and build to the drawings. I've got about 1.8 by 1.5 total width and length. I've then built a little cut sheet here just on Excel so I know exactly what to cut. And here is another good idea as well, because I get my lengths in 4 meters, I can then lay out all of my cuts in CAD so I get minimal wastage. I've then printed these all out, and I will start by cutting all of my box sections down and then highlighting them as I go. Here I'm starting to assemble the main outer box. I'll start by tacking all the corners, and then I'll go through with a grinding disc and just grind a large groove into the main weld faces. I know that a lot of these welds are going to be ground down in the end, so by grinding that groove into it, I know that there will be a lot of penetration and I won't have to worry about the structural integrity of the weld. Now, because I can only fit half of the frame on the welding table at a time, I'm having to do the final welds on the ground, which isn't ideal, but to ensure that they're flat and parallel, I'm using a string line method. You can see from this diagram here, as you bring the two faces together, the string will want to touch and meet in the middle, and you know once they've met in the middle or overlapping that they are flat and parallel. Woohoo! So there I've just got the original springs and mounts removed from the original trailer, and I'm getting them welded onto the new frame now. And it's right about here that everything started to snowball. One of the neighbors at the shop come over and said, if you move the spring mount from here into here, raise it up a bit and get a new axle, then you'll be able to have full drop down sides just like you do on the back of a ute. And that's what we did. There I've just tacked in 4 300mm uprights for each one of the spring mounts, and I can start test fitting the spring to measure up for a new axle. Now that I've got the measurement and have ordered and received the new axle and mounts, I can start dry fitting all of the bearings, hubs, and then I can test fit for wheel and tyre size. Now that they're all locked in, I can start finalising the uprights by capping the ends and then fully welding the spring mounts. Here I've just plasma cut some 6mm gussets for each one of the uprights, and now we can start centering the axle inside of the trailer. I started by calling over the muscliest guy I know, and we're going to get the axle welded onto the locating mounts. You right there, big dog? Now that the trailer's under its own weight, I'm starting to look at the tray sides. I did plan on building my own, but after a bit of common sense, I decided to just buy some, and I got these off Gumtree for 50 bucks. But of course, the rear is too long and the sides are too short, so they need some modifying, but 50 bucks is 50 bucks. Now that the tray sides are somewhat sorted, I'm going to work on the fenders. I did plan on buying a set, but I figured I could create my own by salvaging the originals. All I'm doing here is setting up a fence using a scrap bit of steel to run the plasma along and taking off the lip. I'll then create a fatter, wider lip to suit the new tyres. Now that I'm happy with the shape and the style that I'm looking for, I'm just leaving the front edge tacked in, and I'm going to fully weld the rear. Because it's really thin sheet metal, it's pretty prone to warping, so I'm just tacking every couple of centimeters and then cooling straight away with the air gun to stop that heat spreading. Now that the rear is fully welded, I can start taking a look at the tacks on the front edge, and this is the way I like to metal finish any time that there is a sharp edge. I'll take the majority of the weld off with the grinder and then come back through with the file and a hammer and dolly, and then finish off with an orbital sander. With the fenders taken care of, we're looking at the rear end now that will house our rear lights and number plate, and as you can see, we're just working off the original CAD drawing from earlier. We've got all our degrees for the cuts and all of our measurements laid out there. Then we can take those, print them out, and then start getting it tacked onto the trailer. Now that the rear frame's taken care of, I can start looking at the front headboard frame, but to do that, I have to now extend the tray sides. I've just got the offcuts from the rear side that we chopped off earlier, and I'm just going to weld that straight on, and that overall length will determine where I can start placing the headboard. Now I'm working on getting the fenders mounted permanently. You can see I've got a laser level set up through the center of the hub and also to the center line of the fender. With that all sorted, I can start getting it tacked onto the frame. Now that the fender's not going anywhere, I'm starting to create some custom toolboxes, and I have never done this before, so I don't really know what I was doing, so I didn't get a whole lot of footage on it. But I knew all I had to do was just fill the void between the fender and the rear frame. So I'm just creating a cardboard template of that void, then I'm transferring over to some steel, and we can soon start to see why we created the metal break in the last video. Once I've finished sanding this front sheet, I've then added a 10mm lip to the perimeter. Here I'm cutting and notching some 25mm angle iron, which I'll then be welding to the inside of the box, and that will create the lip for some pinch weld seal. I've also added another sheet tying the fender to the rear frame, and that creates the bottom of the box and also a base for the hinge to be welded to. It might start making a bit more sense now. You can see I'm mounting the pinch weld onto the angle iron. And here I'm marking out the hole to be cut for the lock and latch mechanism. Once we've got this marked out, the front of the box will basically be complete. With one side now half complete, I'm starting to work on the other front half, and I'm basically going to mirror the rear, except the front will be just for aesthetics. You can imagine a massive gap between the front fender and the headboard would just look stupid, so I'm making a beauty panel to tie it in all together. And with that, we now have one side completed. And the best part about it all is you're going to do it all over again for the other side. With all the side panels now complete, I got the apprentice and his safety boots to weld in some more cross members. The one that he's doing now is actually a seal between the fender and the floor. While he's working on that, I got the front headboard sheet cut and notched, and I'm about to weld it in now. With all the fabrication now complete, we can start working on prepping for paint. I will start by just knocking off any of the loose rust with a wire wheel ready for the KBS Coatings Rust Blast. I just want to give a massive shout out to KBS Coatings Australia for all their continued support through each one of our builds and just constantly getting involved with their great products. As you can see, the before and after coming up soon. It is great stuff and we are very appreciative. Here we're capping the drawbar to prevent rust and using a plastic cable gland for the wiring. Obviously welding near plastic isn't a good idea, but we use the same tack and quench with compressed air method to keep it cool, and we're pretty surprised with how well it actually worked.
Kind of work. That's all that. Well, that's not even hot at all. But
With the front end wiring part sorted, I started drilling the hole on the other end. I also cut down these little bits of tube, which I'll weld along the frame to mount the wiring. We can now start blowing everything down with compressed air. Once it's dry and free of any dirt or dust, we can wash it all down with wax and grease remover, and then finally get some epoxy primer on all of the bare steel. Now that the epoxy's cured, we can start seam sealing everything, and being underneath, I was taking no chances with rust. I just pumped it in there. With everything now sealed and masked, it's finally time to start painting. I'm using the Nason 2K Direct Gloss Black because it's what I had laying around, and I'm just getting 2 thick heavy coats on there just to seal everything in. Now that the underside is painted and cured, we can start masking off for any overspray. Once we're masked up, we can flip it over and get the top side covered in epoxy. Once it's fully cured, we can then start seam sealing. Sealed and masked, we are now finally ready to lay down some color, and of course we're going sandy taupe in Raptor liner. Here I'm mixing and spraying the Raptor like a traditional 2-pack paint, mixing it 3:1 with around 20% thinners, and I'm using a gravity fed spray gun to get that flatter finish. I always start by spraying all of my edges and any difficult, hard to reach places, otherwise I find they tend to get lost in the sauce, and then I come back and do any of the large, big areas. also painted the suspension and axle components, and I can now start the final assembly, and I'll start with the wheel hubs. It's now time to start looking at the drawbar. Here I'm getting 2 safety chains welded onto either side, and with that done I can now start making a tyre carrier. I did consider putting a toolbox here as well, but I don't think I need another one, so really it just would have been a waste of space and weight. With the tyre carrier finished, I then threw a coat of paint on the bar and the hitch. We can now fit the new jockey wheel and move on to running the wiring. I've now run the wiring through the drawbar using a snake and secured it to the loops we welded in earlier just using some cable ties. I finished the wiring of the lights off camera and we can now move on to the trailer floor. I decided pretty early on that I wanted an alley floor, so here I am with the new plasma just ripping down some alley checker plate, and here I am just getting it riveted into the frame. With the aluminum floor secured, I'm now installing 4 tie-down points using through bolts going straight through the frame. I messed around with these drill bits for a while until I pulled out the plasma, and I want to give a massive thank you to Richard Swindlehurst from Design and Built on YouTube for this plasma cutter template. It has everything I need and it is life-changing. Thank you, sir. I can now start prepping the floor and the tray sides for Raptor liner. I'll start by using a red Scotch-Brite pad by hand to begin with, and then once I got sick of that, I just chucked the pad on an orbital sander and it actually worked really well. Once it's scuffed, sealed, masked and cleaned, I can now apply the Raptor using the supply gun, as I do want that rough texture because it'll cop a beating from all the cardboard boxes it'll see. While the floor was drying, I also painted the rims, and with the finish line in sight, I can now start installing the final bits and pieces like the number plate, some clearance lights and some mud flaps. All right, and that is it for an episode. Now, if you've made it this far, you deserve an award or something because it is thick. It's probably the longest video I've ever made, and I try to speed things up a lot, as you would have seen, but it's still a big boy. And to say I'm stoked on the trailer is an understatement. I am so pleased with the way it's turned out. I did keep having to remind myself it is just a trailer. You are just carrying rubbish with it. It doesn't need new tires, and it does not need independent coil suspension, but I'm still pretty happy with the way it turned out. I think it is pretty unique, and you'll never see a trailer like it on the road. Now, stick around for next week when we get stuck back into the Troopy. Yes, the Troopy, if you still remember it. Like, subscribe if you haven't already, you know the deal, and I will see you next time. Cheers for watching. Flies, man, get up.